So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming to Carnegie Historical Museum. We're delighted to have Ruth Elmore and Kendra
Helwig.
Helwig. Thank you here to tell us about the Elmore family and its farming here in Jefferson County since 1906.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So, Ruth, we'd like to turn it over to you. This is the year and a half level. We've gone for 18 months now on these First Friday family farm shows. We're only too delighted. They're always on YouTube or the Fairfield Media Center. You can look up youtube.com and look up Heritage Farm. We have both Century Farms and Heritage Farms in abundance. We're already signed up through the end of 2024 with the many deserving families getting a chance to tell their story here at Carnegie Museum and put on a display case upstairs on third floor their family story. So we're delighted you're here, and thanks for coming, Ruth.
You're welcome.
And Kendra.
Well, my family farm is in Penn Township, about 10 miles north of Fairfield here, and I bought it from my grandparents with my dad back in 1980, but my great-grandfather was the one that originally bought it back in 1906, and that was Luther. No, I'm wrong. Luther, yes, Luther Elmore, and he sold it to my grandfather, Albert Elmore, and then that's where I come up with it from my grandfather, with my dad, and back in 1980, and it was my family. Originally, the Elmore side came from Tennessee, and back with Peter Elmore, they said it was from North Carolina, and in some places that's where I found it, and then from Newmarket, Tennessee to Iowa, and Calvin, there's John, Elmore, Calvin, Luther, Albert, my dad, and myself. And I farm. I was a nurse, and retired, and I farm with my niece, Kendra, and I had previously farmed with her father before he passed away, and we have roughly 1,000 acres, and we rent about another 500, and it's mainly row crop. It has we have beef, hogs, and like some chickens, a few peacocks, and lots of cats. And anybody want a cat, they can have a cat. I have on the display upstairs, I have my great-grandfather's funeral, where the casket, they were taking him to the cemetery, and my understanding, he's buried at Salem, and the rest, Calvin, Luther, Albert, and Eugene are all buried in the Pleasant Plains Cemetery.
That's right.
And the horses, they used to farm with the horses. I have the bridle of one of the horses upstairs in the display case, along with rug beaters,
Yeah, I saw the rug beater.
butter churns, and the old pegs out of a barn that my grandparents and my great-grandparents had built.
So no nails, just wood
No
pegs.
nails, the wood pegs, and I have it. Jake was going to try to enlarge it, but couldn't get it done. The barn is still got the old pegs and everything in it, and also where the horses were stalled, I still have those mangers, and the cows that Grandma and Grandpa milked. I still have the stanchions from them. I have a display up there of the rug beater that Grandma used to use, the iron to iron the clothes, the old, and I don't know, I guess just have to go up and see everything that I have. I have on my phone the fly nets that they used to put on the old horses, and Jake was going to try to get a copy made but couldn't do it, and I was going to get it down and bring it in, except I think it was too heavy for them to hang here.
So to keep flies off the horses?
Keep flies off the
Yep.
horses when they worked in the fields. It would just float a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The netting.
Overall weight for each of those would be what? Would you guess? The overall weight for each one of them?
Oh, for the horses or
Yeah, for the netting.
for the netting, it was probably about 100 pounds.
Yeah,
It wasn't a lot, but it was a
It's
lot.
heavy enough.
Heavy enough.
Yeah.
But that's, Kendra, you can chime in. What I've done, I was a registered nurse in the university. I have, before that, I was with Project Hope. It was a hospital ship that sailed and took care of underprivileged people. And then I was on the cardiovascular transplant team at the university. And I've always had a love for the farm and cattle. And when I retired,
I think she works harder now than she did when she worked at her job. Honestly. She would work most people under the table,
no,
even at her age.
I'm a young chick.
Now, as a child, how much time did you spend out on this property?
A lot.
Okay.
A lot.
And
I can remember my grandparents building the house, and you'll see the picture of the house upstairs. When we were little, my sister and I would ride our ponies from where my parents lived up to Grandpa and Grandma's. And Grandpa was a supervisor at the time. And they had a watermelon and a muskmelon patch across the road. And we would go up there, and the carpenters, we would go across and get the watermelon, the muskmelon, and feed the carpenters. And then we put the rinds down in the side of the foundation, and they cover them up with dirt, and Grandpa and Grandma could never figure out where the watermelon and muskmelon went to. And we never did tell them. Never did. But that was a few of the things. And Grandma would have an old Guernsey cow, and she would milk that for the butter and the butter churn.
I remember going up there as a kid and sitting out on the back porch and eating Grandma's cookies
Homemade cookies.
as a young child. Great Grandma's cookies.
Yeah.
Was it where one-room school nearby?
Yes.
Which one would have that been?
Would have been Center Schoolhouse in Penn Township.
Got it.
It's still sitting there today.
Okay. Is it repurposed, or
No,
is it still
no.
empty sitting?
It's sitting empty.
Just
I would like to see it done. I'd like for the township or somebody to fix it back up. Because it had the old potbelly stove, the whole
Everything.
9 yards in it.
Is it still visitable? Could
Yes.
it be? You know, it's been a project here at this museum we had in late June a one-room school reunion out at the fairgrounds during our county fair, and 40 plus people came out on a day that was 95 degrees and stayed 2 hours to remember their stories and share them about being in one of the 99 one-room schools that was here in Jefferson County. So it'd be fun for us to visit that one, and maybe we can make an arrangement. I assume it's locked up and everything else.
I don't know if it's locked up. I think you could probably
Okay.
get into it.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, all right.
But it was,
We hope don't make somebody mad, but we'd like to find out as much as we can about those places. Did someone from your family then attend that one-room
my
school?
dad did.
Okay,
My dad did. And he used to drive a team to school with
Yep.
a little bus. And in the wintertime, I can remember him saying the storm or the snow and everything was so much worse back then. It seemed like that they could go across country right over the fences
wow.
with the teams.
So with the horse-drawn school bus then?
Yes.
Yeah, we've had a
Yes.
lot of report.
Yes.
Some of the kids said that they would just ice skate to school, when
Yeah.
things got tough. So that'd be fun too, I
Yeah.
suppose. That's great. And then nearest church nearby would have been?
The Friends Church at Pleasant Plain.
Right, okay.
Mhm.
And is that your family background?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right.
Yes. Most of my family is buried there.
Okay. I figured when you mentioned the cemetery, the Friends Church in Richland and in Pleasant Plain were often the places where Underground Railroad freedom seekers came from Fairfield and found their way there. We have record of both, but especially of Pleasant Plain. So there's a lot of that story. Our museum just this week has received recognition from the National Park Service, Underground Railroad. It's a special program called Network to Freedom, and the Fairfield Carnegie Library and Carnegie Museum and its Evergreen Cemetery have been accepted as points on that network. And so there'll be more coming out about that in the news soon. And we're only too delighted that your family was part of where the Freedom Seekers got to go next.
That's interesting. No, I have never been to the Salem Cemetery, but I just discovered that was where the John Elmore was buried.
Yeah, that was interesting. You mentioned also a Quaker community, almost its entirety, and also an Underground Railroad juncture for sure.
Now, when we were kids, and maybe Jeanette remembers too, that we took a trip to New Market, Tennessee, where the Elmores came from, and there was a cemetery down there with Elmores, but I remember very little about it now. I don't know, maybe she does, but
It's a town down there, Elmore.
and, but I don't remember, that much about it now.
Is there anything in the family lore about what drew them to Iowa as such, and in particular this place? Was it the Quaker community that was already present?
I think they just moved.
Okay.
Stanley?
We do have relatives
do have some
here.
connection here.
Can we explain that? Can we explain the family connection?
Stanley's mother and my grandfather were brother and sisters.
All right.
So there's a little connection here. So if I make a mistake,
Well,
Stanley will speak up.
okay.
I'm making notes.
Oh, so Mr. Simmons is taking notes. All right. Well, very good. No, this is great. Well, for our part, we're delighted that they came. And it looks like it was a smaller parcel of land of 80 acres
80
initially.
acres. And matter of fact, Grandpa Albert, I've got a note here.
That's fine.
Luther got it in 1906.
Okay.
And the way I understand it from the deed in the abstract, it was $3,500 is what he paid for that 80 acres. But, and there was, from the time that the United States government turned it over to the state of Iowa, it was like in 1845, I think it was.
1846, Iowa was.
1845, and then it
Okay.
went to a John Davis in 1851. And between 1851 and the time that Luther bought it, it changed hands, and many different people had got it. And then Luther got it in 1906.
Got it.
And then Grandpa bought it with Luther, I think it was, or went in on it in 1950.
Okay.
Or 1946.
Now you mentioned it. You're farming about more than 1,000 acres now.
I have that 80 acres, and then I bought more, and then with Kendra and the family, and we run about 400 head of beef cows, and have the hogs, and row crop.
Our hats are off to you. I think everybody would say for the energy level required to do this, and the commitment. Was it a promise you made your father?
I always wanted to run.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Give her a
I
hand.
mean,
Give him a hand.
I miss the nursing part of it. I miss the patient care and that part. But I tell you, it's so different now than when I started. I think the patient care is there, but it's not a one-on-one basis as what it was when I,
Back in the day.
back in the day is right.
That's what the kids say in school. I picked up the phrase, so that's good for you. Well, holidays, there's always distinctive flavors in family reunions, and the holidays, there are some times that stood out, for both of you. I'd like to say what stood out more as you look back in the long haul of being children, being part of this property, part of this family.
The main thing, well, one of the main things is that every Christmas vacation, we would process our own cat or our own beef and hogs, and we would do it at the farm, the whole 9 yards.
Really?
And then the other thing is that we have over the years deer hunt. The family all gets together and deer hunts.
Do you have timber?
Yes.
Okay, how much overall would you guess?
A lot.
Okay, we'll accept that. Certainly can't dispute it. I know the DNR has a formula. They'll often fly over the timber and however many, they have a formula of how many deer they see, then they multiply it by something they won't divulge, and then they tell us what they think the estimate is. Do you have any guesses on how many deer are making?
It just depends. I mean, they
Some
kind of,
years are more, yeah.
yeah, they kind of float through and,
Yep.
you know, we're not.
We give them a run for their money though every December.
Okay, so
I,
that's,
I probably shouldn't tell this, but
go ahead.
they don't think I can hit a broadside of a barn.
Ah,
But one year I hit a deer on the run, like you wouldn't believe. And they swore I was going to miss it. I rolled, killed it. And not far from that, we were on another hunt, and I shot a turkey in the butt. And I know if the game
In
warden,
flight.
in flight,
whoa.
and I know if the game warden saw me, I might be strung
You
up.
had your turkey license. It was just with the slug instead of with what the correct.
No, it won't leave this room.
That's been about several years ago.
And then when the girls were little, Kendra has a twin sister, Gretchen and Amy. I would always, I mean, they were 5, 6 years old. I would always take them deer hunting. I never carried a gun. But when they got a little older, I carried a gun. And one year, I shot a 10-point buck.
Oh my.
And the girls were all with me. So we just proceeded on, left the deer lay, got up to the top of the hill, and I said, now you guys can go back and pull him up. And then I made them pull him up.
Well, gave them experience that they remember, I imagine. Have they mentioned it?
Oh, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could take you right to the spot.
Yeah, we had some good times. But no, that's,
When we look back far enough like this, and you know, in 1906, we realized there was not electricity on any farms. And Congress passed a law in 1936 said we're going to have electrification in all rural areas in the United States, but World War II ended, deferred that until most cases it was after World War II was over that the copper wire that's used, you know, in wartime could be used once again for stringing wire out to the farms. Is there any record in the family history of when electricity came out to that house?
it would have been about 1950,
Okay.
1950, right up
Within Iowa, that's not late. It's late. It seems really late. It's 14 years after the law was passed, but we know what intervened. And so that's why that's not a surprising date to have. And then the second biggest one is, when did you get indoor plumbing, or is it there out of that house?
It would have been when they built it, they had,
Okay, more power to them.
yeah,
All right.
they would have had indoor plumbing then.
Now, there are a lot of stories about the electricity, and I apologize for asking this. There are a lot of reports that in the old icebox days, they saw your ice tongs up in
Yes.
the display case, and I assume that until a pretty late
Yeah.
time, you had an icebox. One, where did the ice come from? And then two, when did it become a refrigerator? Was it 50? What'd you say?
It would probably been that or a little before, yeah.
Okay, but the ice tongs, where would they get the ice?
Brighton.
Okay, so it came down from Brighton.
And Pleasant Plain used to have a grocery store too.
Okay,
That Turner's grocery store.
okay.
That they had stuff like that we would go, you know, for groceries. But when my grandparents built that house, they lived about a fourth of a mile to the west, And Luther, my great-grandfather, had lived there. They tore down the house, and Grandpa and Grandma built the house where it's at now, and had sold the other farm to Hubert Hoskins at that time.
Okay.
But that was back in the 50s, right before that all.
As far as schooling for yourself, which high school did you go
Pleasant
to?
Plain.
Okay.
And the last class, they reorganized, and the last class was with my sister in 1961, and then we reorganized to Fairfield,
Got it.
and I finished there.
Okay, because I know that in 1959 they started to bring kids in from the one-room
Yes.
schools. And then some of the high schools that were going to graduate a class are allowed to have a couple more years. And then they said, okay, now you're coming into town.
Yeah.
All right. And then did you do your nurse? When did you do your training for?
I did it in Ottumwa at St.
Okay.
Joseph
Great.
and Ottumwa Heights College.
Yep.
And then I went to work at the university, and I was with the first kidney transplant at the university.
Wow.
And then went with Project Hope and spent a year in Jamaica and Kingston. And you really knew what it was like, even with the people there that wanted help, there was always those that didn't want you there,
Got it.
you know, and it was quite interesting. A lot of the equipment and things like that at the hospital there at the university was very modern, very up to date, but they didn't know how to use it, so they thought it was outdated.
Oh,
And there was, in Kingston, there was a section of town that you really didn't enter, you know, and I think that's like many places. And then I come back to the university, and worked in the cardiovascular transplant in the operating room. So,
but you suggested that all that time you were there, you still had in the back of your mind to come back to the farm?
I had, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I still had the farm, and I still had cattle, and I had a dad and a brother that helped take care of it.
Fantastic. And Kendra, for your part, when did, was it something you made a conscious decision to continue, or?
Absolutely. I've wanted a farm since I was a couple, 3 years old. Like, I used to sleep in my blue jeans so I wouldn't miss Dad going out of the house. I knew if he left, I wouldn't get to catch up with him. So, yeah, I've always wanted a farm. I feel thankful that I've gotten the opportunity to carry on the family tradition.
And when did you come back to the farm?
It would have been 2013. 2013. I came back full time.
Okay.
But as soon as I graduated high school, I started buying in and purchased some cattle and started farming some land, and just progressively was able to work into the farm.
Great. Was your high school here at
Yes,
Fairfield?
I
Okay.
graduated from Fairfield in 2000.
Got it. All right. Well, we wish statewide that there were more like you. I think we all do. We see the national trend of enormous, farms, corporate farms. And as Jefferson County stands among the 99 counties of Iowa, it's one of the counties with the highest percentage of family farms. So you're in good company here. But overall, as a national trend, it's dwindling company.
Yes.
And so we salute you especially for keeping that tradition going, doing such a great job. I promise that people who had questions tonight would be able to answer them. I know Mr. Stan Simmons is probably taking assiduous notes here. We're going to have to give him a shot. So, no, just Stan, did you want to add anything, or did you have questions for?
Watch
The
out.
one unique thing I remember about Luther, my granddad, her great granddad, they moved to Des Moines around World War II time. And they lived on 56th Street, I believe, which at that time was kind of on the border of Des Moines, it was at the west side.
Got it.
And he had a cow.
The cow's pictures
Yep.
upstairs.
A cow in
picture's at the
town?
display.
The cow's
It's in the
pictures
display.
upstairs.
Yeah, we got to see this. Everybody, I hope you'll go upstairs when we're done. It's awesome.
And that was pretty unique. And as a little boy, we we went about once a year. And, when he fed the cattle, he was hooked up with a bakery somehow, and they're outdated stuff. And you'd have bags of bread and baked goods, and that's what they fed the cow.
So is that where you got your idea from?
And, I'll have to admit that
It rubbed
I
off.
followed suit.
Stanley, I have to tell this, Stanley and Donna would go down to Burlington to the bakery, and they would come back with a pickup load of day-old, old stuff, and they would feed their cows.
Well, they would make the trip around the
The
neighborhood,
neighborhood to
first,
see who wanted
and
what.
everybody would pick through the back end of his truck, and then they would go feed the cows.
Then they
Fair
go,
enough. Right of first refusal went to the people.
there you go,
That's
right.
good.
Well, the one thing that was true, that the cattle loved it.
Yeah,
And they did well.
that's great.
I could go to Burlington and get a whole truckload for $10.
Fantastic.
And we would have everything under the sun in the back end of that pickup.
It wasn't overhead, sometimes it was donuts and, good stuff.
Pastries.
Very good.
No,
Well,
the picture of Luther and the cow is upstairs.
the only cow on 56th Street in Des Moines. So we definitely hope people will see it. Any other questions or comments? We've got,
I guess.
Yes, sir.
I'm Ken's brother.
yes,
I will never forget Grandpa Gene.
My dad.
okay,
We moved cattle from down south. Well, Heseltine's was right there, which Ruth owns it now. Little house. This lady was a witch. Nothing hit her yard with a cow's foot. She was out there with a broom. And she would hit you over the top of the head and don't let that cow in my yard. And Grandpa, he was just laughing in his pickup, because I always got to run back and forth in her yard. It was always, I never forgot that.
that rug beater was probably for a similar purpose.
There you go.
Yeah, but yeah, it was just a memory we used to move cattle, which they still do some, but all the fences out now, it's hard to move all the cattle down the road. It used to be a big deal. They'd move all the cattle up in the fall, and in the spring, they'd move them back to pastures. Sometimes horses, sometimes 3-wheelers.
I'm sorry we don't have those horse nets. I think people would be astonished.
I have
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to pass this around.
And we can pass a picture around. You can imagine putting a 100-pound net over a person and saying, well, so keep the flies off you if you can stand up.
Well, Jeanette and those guys probably know. Maybe
Yeah.
So Ruth, is the high wheel wagon,
the high wheel wagon,
was that
that was
came
back.
through the family?
Can you explain that to the
Do you know if it's a turning wagon?
What?
Do you know if it's a turning wagon?
attorney?
Built in Fairfield?
Yes, yes. And then I also
It's
have
got the end seater on it too, doesn't
yeah,
it?
the end seeder where we used to seed, and then I have the old Loudon. What I want to say,
Barn track.
barn track, still with a rope on it that come out of the barn.
The pulleys for haying and for everything else.
And I
Wonderful.
have the forks. They didn't they didn't keep the forks, but I have the forks where we would mow the hay, and we'd have to drive the tractor or whatever for the whole day to pull that hay up into the hay mow. Maybe we'd get $1 if we were good.
I beg your pardon, before the tractor, we rode a horse.
I
Yeah,
was gonna say,
yeah.
it used to be a horse,
Yeah.
too.
yeah,
It's our land now.
yeah.
We've got some of that Loudon equipment upstairs, a miniature barn, so they could, we found a
I have
catalog.
the same thing.
Do you have that same? Because you could buy any part of the barn, or the catalog will let you buy the whole thing. It was like a Swiss Army house. You just kind of pull this out, pull this out. People would buy every single item in the catalog and have their whole barn just from Loudon. It was brilliant. I mean,
Oh, cool.
there's no question about it. Everybody seeing the horse net?
But no, I would have brought him in, but I don't think you'd have been able to hang him.
No, we would have been arrested, for throwing over people's heads and whatnot. Go ahead, thanks. Yeah, you can bring it up, that's great, we'll give it back to her. Thank you. Now, are there any future farmers in our midst tonight? Are we thinking, are the people showing interest?
I have 3 kids. Then my little sister has 3. My older sister has 3. My brother has 2. So I'm sure within those 11, there should be somebody to carry on.
That's great. It's something, do you like it out there too?
Yeah.
Good. That's great. That's why it's always worked here in Iowa for all these, it's a couple centuries now. 1846, Iowa became a state, but people moved in here, crossed the Mississippi River in 1833, and the first man that staked a claim for land in what's now Jefferson County was John Huff. He came in 1835. So we're getting right up pretty close to 200 years ago.
Wow.
So it's a nice tradition to be carrying on. We think it's
There's a
great.
picture upstairs of my dad and a drill and the team that he used to plant the crop with.
Fantastic. We'd love to see that.
So
You mentioned the planter on the back of the wagon, the turning wagon.
Is
It's
it-
an in-gate seeder. So I think that they used to put the oats in the seeding in the high wheel wagon, and then
Yes.
they would have to hand scoop it into the seeder. Is the way I always understood
and
it.
then there was a chain on the wheel
Mm-hmm.
that would rotate.
Drive it.
I
Fantastic.
remember doing that with Grandpa over at Schultz's.
Mhm.
Because I was not happy because Dad had a regular drill tractor and I was a copper cleaned up on him. Now I look back and it was a really cool deal.
No, I still have the wagon.
You do? Okay. Now there are people, we've had some footage taken earlier on for the 3rd film in the Fairfield History Series, A Place to Grow, they called it. It was a single row harvester, 1 row.
Mm-hmm.
And with this 1,000 acres, you can imagine how long.
That would take.
Yes. In fact, we had a drone operator that would kind of back up and go higher as he backed up. And you saw this we borrowed a 1927 John Deere tractor, put the single row harvester behind it, let the whole thing chug down
Oh, wow.
the row. And we realized by the time we got back to high enough to see, that single row harvester would never finish by the time the season was over. It would not be done with the size of that field. And so it is an extraordinary change. I wonder how you have gone about increasing how much ground you can cover, and farm that many acres.
We used to do a 2-row corn picker,
Really?
but look what it is today.
Yeah. Well, it has increased the efficiency of what 2 people can do, and that's pretty fantastic. We appreciate it.
Well, she keeps me in line.
I think that's a 2-way street.
Fair enough.
I couldn't do it anymore without her to help me.
That's
Well, and
great.
vice versa. The expertise of
She doesn't think I know anything.
sometimes.
90% of the time.
Well, I'm Switzerland here. I'm just totally neutral. You can have whatever view you wish. It's great you're working together. I think we have, anybody else have a question or comment?
I just want to carry something, Tom at the post office, you're his aunt?
No, it'd be a cousin. It'd be connected with Stanley.
So Tom at the post office
Tom.
is
Simmons.
Tom Simmons.
You're
Yeah.
not related to Tom?
Yes.
We are.
yes, but through Stan, so to speak, as far as the
Tom's-
Simmons.
It would
Tom's
be
dad is Stan's brother.
is Stan's brother.
So his grandmother would be
My
or sister or brother to Grandpa.
be my grandpa would be Stan's brother. Well, it'd be
His grandma.
Stan's mother. Yes, I
We
am
are
related.
related. just
Oh,
in a
just a roundabout.
Okay, but Tom called you Aunt Ruth.
Oh well, everybody calls me Aunt Ruth.
Everybody calls Ruth. Aunt
Everybody
Ruth.
Very
calls
good.
me.
That's alert. That's alert.
And he said he used to haul hay on your farm in summer.
Yes,
Okay, and so then he was whining about how
he would get yes.
sometimes the hay would be too green, which means it was.
It would
too
be heavy. He was just a weakling. He was just a weakling.
He was griping.
He was
just
griping. It wasn't really heavy, but he was just thought it was heavy.
Tom, sorry, bro. We're telling you the
So
truth.
it goes into the story about how if you put the hay in the barn when it's too green, it can heat up.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Combust.
What?
It can combust.
Right, and then he's saying that some bunch of barns have burned down because of the hay being too green. So do you guys want to explain all that dynamic? Because I've never heard of a barn burning down because the hay was too green.
It will heat, combust, and catch on fire.
Well, I don't understand how it can combust because it's too green.
The moisture
Moisture.
in it, and you pack it in, and it's tight, and the air has no place to go. So the hay is packed in. We stack it in a certain direction, and it's really tight, and so the moisture has nowhere to get out. So it combusts and can cause fire. So there's times that we generally, when we put hay up, we'll walk through those barns several times a week just to make sure we don't smell something. And we've been known, actually this summer, Ruth pulled out, I think we had 120 some bales in one barn, and she pulled out every bale because we couldn't find the hot bale.
We knew
And
it was
then we
hot.
leave it set out and then put it back in. So it's a lot of work, but
How did you know it was hot?
you could smell it.
You can smell it.
It's starting to smell like it's burning.
Uh-huh.
And you touch the bale, and it will be hot. And if it's hot, you want to get it out of a barn or it'll burn.
So in those small square bales, though, a lot of times if they're just a little bit damp, we'll put salt on them, and that helps take the
Cure 'em.
moisture and cure. We try not to put them up when it's too wet, but sometimes
happens.
the Mother Nature doesn't always work with us, and we have to put things up when
So you
we
put
need
them,
to.
you put them in the barn when they're too wet because it's just raining and
Well,
they didn't have a chance to dry out.
most of the time it's not too wet, but sometimes there's you'll find one bale here or one bale there we call it a slug. You know, there's a wet slug in it,
Just doesn't
and
get
that's
dried.
what doesn't get dry, and that's what can cause your problems.
Okay, so it's not the whole thing is too wet, it's just
A
parts of
bale
it is
here
too
or a
wet.
bale there. Yeah.
And when I was talking to Tom about it, I was saying my grandma and grandpa used to argue about whether or not to bale the hay at a certain period of time because the discussion was that you want to have a second crop. Like we used to go in summer and help them, haul the hay. That's like haul hay is the summer thing. And then there would be a fall crop too. So the discussion wasn't, it was never really about the greenness, but whether or not, well.
You'd have time to get the second crop.
Yeah,
Generally,
you have to have
like-
time to get a second crop.
Generally, we do 3 to 4 crops. Depends on the crop itself. So like alfalfa, we can get 3 to 4 cuttings off of it. It usually takes about 20 to 28 days for that plant to grow back and start to bloom, and that's when we harvest that crop again. And so it just depends on the weather, whether we're getting rain or not, as to how fast that crop comes back. But like on a grass crop, sometimes we only get 2 cuttings off. So it just
Yeah.
depends on what's out there.
I think they were growing fescue. Would that be two?
There's a lot of fescue in the county.
That would be 2. Well, this is in Arkansas, but that's why there were 2 instead of 4. It's because it was the type of.
Like the legumes will grow back faster in the summer months versus grass. You get a cutting right off to begin with, and then a lot of times it'll go dormant through the summer and the hot months, and then you'll get another cutting off in the fall.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
I remember.
Depends on the rain.
Okay. If you have, I was thinking about this since I talked to Tom about how they would insist if there were air flows between the bales.
Mhm.
So that would be for drying.
Mhm.
I do remember that part of if you packed them in too tight, then there was a big hysterical fit over that because they had to have air. So that would be because of the green off gas or.
We try to get everything dry, but it doesn't always.
No, these weren't dry when we put them in the
So if we put up any wet hay, we wrap them with plastic, and so it's kind of like corn silage, and it ferments, and it creates more of a silage than it does a dry hay. So we feed it a different way than what we feed our dry hay.
So if you put it in and it's curing because it's got plastic, that's not gonna blow up?
No, because it's airtight. There is no, like, at the ends are tight, everything's tight. There's no air to it.
And that doesn't heat up
No.
and start a fire?
It does. It might heat, but it doesn't start the fire.
You can't have a fire without air.
Oxygen.
Oh, wow, this is a complicated story.
This is like school. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for explaining that.
Thank you.
I don't really fully understand it, but I understand that it's a lot more complicated than
Can I ask a question about round hay bales? Well, officially, it all began in 1975, but they haven't caught on. They've caught on gradually, and it's around the world gradually. You know, the capacity they have. John Deere had them, but in Germany and other places. So, who has round hay bales?
We
Anybody?
do.
Okay, you do. Okay, good. And they're not as efficient for packing in some ways. Like if you're trying to,
You can't really put them up in a hay mow or
Right,
anything
at all.
like that.
right?
You know, you have
But
to.
you have,
We have a building that we can put them in that's big enough. But as far as a hay mow or anything like that, that's where your square bales, your
Right.
little square bales go in.
do you still use a square baler?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
We
you have
just got
both.
done square baling about 1,000 square bales.
Okay,
And then
fantastic.
our corn stalk bales, we'll bale some of them in the small bales for our calving barn. Because we have a calving barn, we calve in January in the cold, and we have a heated calving barn with 16 pens in it, so we can have 16 plus a few more cows in there to have their babies
That's great. Do you use the plastic on your round bales too?
on some of them,
Okay, because I see some yes, some no.
not all of them.
Okay.
We have enough barn space that we put most of our crop underneath roof.
Yep.
And if we don't have those bales that we can't fit underneath roof,
Then
we
you
generally either wrap them wet or dry, depends on Mother Nature.
And the
Got it.
quality of them.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it's good to know. I got my questions answered. Anybody else? Well, this has been, yes, go ahead.
Another question, you've got a lot of different things going on with a lot of acres, some of it's wood, some of it's row crop, some of it's farm animals, and so I just wondering if you could give me a general idea of like what percentage you've got 1/4 woods, 1/4 road, 1/4 hay, how's that kind of general estimate of how you've got them?
Scattered.
You rotate, some years it's hay and some years it's soy, so you rotate the crops?
So we generally do a corn soybean rotation, but as our cattle herd has increased, we've been more on the corn side because we need that for feed and we need it for bedding for corn stalks. So our acres that are closest to home, we're mostly corn on corn. We have been continually seeding more acres down so we can feed those cows. And so I would say we're probably at least half of our acres are either pasture or seeded to hay, some type of a forage. And then we finish a lot of those acres with corn and very few soybeans, but some. But most of our crop is to feed our cows. And what crop we do sell, we sell to the guy that we feed our pigs to. So it's kind of like a full circle. We mostly feed our crop that we raise.
So that the reason for that is because the cows and the pigs are more profitable than just growing.
We enjoy the livestock side of things because I feel like we can add value to that. We can change our cattle by genetics and by what we put into it, and it's what Ruth and I enjoy. It's something different than a larger row crop farm, and I guess that's just what our passion is livestock.
You take a lot of pride in the quality
Absolutely.
Yes.
We live, breathe, and think. Like during calving season, I mean, we're out in the barn. I would say we do an average of 18-hour days, night or 20-hour days. Depends on, but for the entire winter. And then the hours that we're not in there, somebody's in the barn every 2 hours checking those cows, and somebody's with the cow that's birthing always. Very few cows are
By themselves.
by themselves.
So how many cows are there?
About 400.
Oh, and you can put that many in a barn?
No,
We
well,
have multiple. We have one home facility, and we have multiple barns that are all attached together, and it's quite the process. We have one barn that we actually calve in, and then we have multiple lots. I call it musical cows. I mean, all day long, Ruth's in the skid loader primarily, and she's either feeding or cleaning. I mean, she'll spend 12 to 16 hours a day in the skid loader, either cleaning or feeding. And then I do a lot of the footwork as far as moving the cows around from one lot to another while she's doing a lot of the feeding. And then we just both pay attention as to who's calving and who's not. Somebody's in the lot. We do hire some part-time work during that time of the year just to help us manage all the labor. Like those 16 pens, we clean and rebed, let those cows out, feed every day. We move them around, and it's just a process of pretty tedious because everything has to be clean. In order to have that many cows in one facility at one point in time, everything has to be very, very clean. And so, I mean, it's nothing for us to clean every lot every day, or at least every other day.
For 400 cows, you have them in a,
Yeah.
they're sheltered from the winter, obviously, but you have them.
some of them are out and some of them are in.
We've got concrete lots with dry lots associated with them, and each one of those lots have a barn or covered facility. And so there's a lot of times that the cows can't get into that covered area, but the baby calves can.
But during summer, they're out in the
They're out in
Yes.
pasture. Yep.
So you don't have to clean up after that.
Right. It feels like you're on vacation when some cows go to pasture.
We're
Yeah.
really on vacation now.
So we calve all those cows, and then we run everybody through the chute and give them their vaccinations. But then it starts, the whole next season is breeding season. And so I go in and artificially inseminate most of those cows. And so we have like multiple seasons on top of each other, I guess, in those winter months.
They're not just hanging out, they're really doing something.
They are. Yeah.
You're getting your most out of them.
Yeah, and we can pay attention to detail because they are right there. And we pay attention to those calves, and we keep like our heifer pairs in a different lot so we can feed them a little heavier than what we do some older cows, and yeah, we can pay attention to detail that way.
So it's mostly about creating more cows.
A lot of our calves, like our steers, we sell for beef, and we sell them to fatten out. Our heifer groups, we keep probably around 50 to 60 heifers every year for our own replacements, and then we sell most of the rest of those heifers to another couple that take them and breed them and calve them out and sell them as pairs. And then there's just a very minute 30 to 40 head of smaller calves that we actually sell through the sale barn. But we're focused on trying to save replacements or make replacement heifers, and then also market our our calves to take to market for the steers.
So you're sort of grading them. These are the better ones we're going to regenerate because they're better quality.
The genetics of our herd, we have had a closed herd for 30 years at least. And so the way we get new genetics is by AIing, and we save the best of those and put back into our herd. And so when I say closed herd, we haven't purchased any livestock for 30 years. We just buy semen, and we artificially inseminate and get better genetics by that.
Thanks for explaining that. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a lot more complicated than.
It's a lot of work.
30,000 acres,
Yeah.
but then you get into the details and it's just like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about working cows, in the spring of the year, we generally run each one of our cows through the chute at the bare minimum of 4 times before they go to the pasture. So from calving to pasture, every one of those cows are through the chute 4 times because we give pre-vaccinations, and then we give them shots to be able to bring them into heat, and then we have to go out and we have to heat detect because you have to breed on a certain how many hours after they're in a standing heat, and then you bring them back through when you breed them. So that at the bare minimum, every cow is through our chute 4 times, besides the calves. So it's a lot of chute work.
Just a note here that AI stands for something different in a lot of places.
I hadn't thought about that.
It's like, they did it with AI. How did they do that?
Do they all get branded?
I've started. We have ear tags, but a lot of times the ear tags aren't as good as what they used to be, and so I have started freeze branding each heifer. So as I say replacement heifers, those heifers I freeze brand. So not every cow in our herd is freeze branded, but eventually over the next 10 years, every cow in our herd will be freeze branded. So that's a second form of identification for us. So we still run the ear tags. That's the number we go off of. But in our books, we have the second form of identification. So if they lose the tag, we still know what cow that is.
So this animal husbandry seminar is coming to a close.
Sorry, I do kind of like
This is
talking about my cows.
No, it's fantastic. It's been great. We're look forward to seeing this show, literally. But I want to make sure that people have a chance to go upstairs to look at the display, and if we can have maybe some back and forth.
Yeah.
Feel free to ask questions. There are some of the things that have been talked about here, including that amazing rug beater. Are going to be up there and any more questions. But we're just delighted, and we want to thank Ruth. We want to thank Kendra for coming tonight. This has just been great. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Did you ever get beat with a rug beater?
I was hoping there was a
I'm just
backstory.
curious.
No, but I could see boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that could work. Upstairs on the 3rd floor, we take the elevator. That's the simplest way to go. In fact, it's the only non-security switch activating way to go. So just out the front and up to 3rd. Everyone's welcome. We hope to see you next month, and we'll be very happy to note that the reunion for Parsons College, the 50th reunion, the final reunion, 50 years after their last graduation, is October 6th, 7th, and 8th here in town, and it'll be accompanied by the premiere of the film Parsons from the Fairfield History Series. So that'll be coming up real soon. Thanks again for coming, everybody, and thank you. Chloe. That was great.
I don't know if that's-